Hi, Emily.
Hey, how are you, Amy?
I am doing really good. I am really excited to talk to you today about everything you have going on as part of the Women Influencing Sports podcast. But as many people know, you have your own podcast. So this is all comfortable for you. It's fun. It's fun for me to talk to someone else who does a podcast because I feel like we could do a whole episode about that.
I agree. And yeah, leadership is female. We're over 83 episodes in interviewing women who work in sports and sports adjacent and who are leaders and want to, to use your word, influence the next generation or even their peers, because there's so much advice that can be laid down. And it always feels like you hear the right thing at the right time. Like, oh, I'm going through that too. And just to find that space where, there's somebody else out there going through it helps you feel seen.
Yes. And I love what you're doing with Leadership Female. And I might add, before we jump into the full blown questions, I saw that you guys just got a sponsor, which is awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning Mobot. It is, you can see my Peloton in the background. I got a Peloton. I'm a gym member. I'm going to say it publicly. I'm training for my first marathon. So now I'm committed. So I love working out, and there's this incredible company called Mobot, female founded. This woman, Lonnie Cooper, is a total dynamo. And she invented and patented a water bottle that is also a foam roller. It's like steel reinforced on the inside with the foam rolling mold on the outside. So it's 2-in-1. And I am also a huge proponent of life hacks and anything that has to do with efficiency. So the fact that I don't have to use some stinky foam roller at the gym somebody else used, it's like right on my water bottle, is amazing. So every guest gets a Mobot, and then there's a code for listeners to get a percentage off their order. So it's a great tool.
It's genius.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you mentioned that you're training for a marathon. That's incredible. I was thinking you might be a runner because I checked out your LinkedIn profile. It said you were involved with Girls on the Run. So we can get into that later. But I love that you have a sponsor. It ties right in with what you do, right? Because, we're going to talk about it. I mean, up until recently, you were the GM of the AAA minor league baseball, right? Reno Aces. And in my notes, I have that you were the first woman in nearly 20 years to be the GM of a AAA baseball team, which is incredible.
Thank you.
Part of being GM, like you're overseeing sponsorship and you understand sponsorship. So you were able to take that knowledge into your podcast. And it's such a smart way to bring on a sponsor, right? I think we could get into this topic for an hour, right? Sponsorship and doing it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So that clearly like makes sense for you as a person, like that particular product. You already love that product. You're a runner, you have the Peloton, you have the podcast. It makes so much sense. I love that you're doing that. And I feel like the execution on saying like every guest gets one, that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the word partnership there's a reason why we call them marketing partnerships, because they make the most sense when it truly is authentic, dang near organic, the way that it comes together. And if I'm into a brand, I'm going to talk about it more. And there's also sort of a theme with women who work in sports. A lot of them were athletes, and that's why they have a passion for staying in the game. So they appreciate this partnership as well, because then it's a tool for them. And while we don't pay, our guests on the podcast, it's a way I feel like to just give them a little bit of value and a thank you for their time as well. So it's worked out well. And partnerships have been kind of my go-to since really day one. I was on the nonprofit side for a long time, and that's what I brought to the table for those organizations is partnerships that could bring in money the same way that they do in sports.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. So Emily, formerly GM until recently, as I mentioned, of the AAA Reno Aces. I love how you said that you're taking a breather right now, right? Having just had your third child. So we got to get into that too, because we have a lot in common there. I have 3 daughters. You have 2 sons and a daughter, and you've done all this incredible stuff, and you're taking a breather. And I was right there, and we kind of talked about this a little bit. Like, my breather happened after number 3 for so many reasons. But I want to hear about your, you said you have a nonlinear career path. So how did you kind of get into sports to start with? And what are some of your passion points? I mean, we already talked about you're a runner.
Yeah. So I was an athlete my whole life. I have 2 brothers. And so the competition was thick from day one, whether I was getting fouled hard on the driveway, playing one-on-one with my older brother, or, hit in the back of the head with a baseball when the 3 of us were playing running bases in the front yard. Like, we were at it early. I was the only girl on the t-ball team. That was my first sports gig. And then I was in soccer. I was in track. I did gymnastics, volleyball, cross country. I did everything. And I played soccer for about 30 seconds in college, D1, and then ended up on the club team for the rest of my time at Illinois, which was the perfect fit for me because I could thrive on the sports field, like performance I could do, but I was painfully shy. And going to this big university, Amy, I was like so lost. And small town to big school, there was, I don't know, my hometown, 3,500 people. There were 3 towns that went to one school. So my graduating class in high school was 500, but that's only because it was 3 towns converging on one. And I was just struggling in college because it was so big and I didn't know anybody. So joining club soccer was huge for me, but also joining a sorority and really finding this group of women that I could be a part of, and not be a part of because of my athletic ability. It was being a part of because of like who I am and who I was finding out who I was on the inside, is what helped me to grow. So stayed playing soccer all 3 years, 3 of the 4 years. 4th year, I took off and did more academic type things. I was the co-chair of the American Advertising Federation competition. My major was advertising. All the agencies were visiting campus. I got a full-time offer to join an agency in Chicago. And a woman who was 2 years ahead of me in my sorority was working for the Chicago Bulls. And I got in touch with Laura and I was like, hey, I'm so interested in this. I've wanted to work in sports forever. I didn't understand like how that worked. Can you talk to me about like what are front office roles? What do people there do? Like what needs to be done? Wound up applying for an internship in ticket sales, and Lauren helped my resume get seen from this stack of like thousands, which was a really good lesson for me to learn early on, that relationships, staying in touch, asking questions, asking for help is really important in order to stand out from the pile. You can have a million accolades, but like, let's say you apply at the wrong time, your resume might not get seen. So finding people who work at that organization to help raise your visibility is so important. So I started with the Bulls, 9-month internship, did really well. I finished first in group sales, but I did not get a full-time job at the end of the internship. And that was the first like big loss for me. And I was devastated, and I had to think about like, now what, or what am I going to do next? And I really took a time to kind of reflect on what I enjoyed most. I definitely loved the group sales piece. And I really liked what the charitables, the nonprofit arm was doing. So I was like, maybe I'll work for a nonprofit. So I found a job with Muscular Dystrophy Association as a program coordinator, which meant that I was fundraising. And I was fundraising through their programs that they had that were part of like their core business, but also creating larger partnerships to help raise more money for people affected by muscular dystrophy. And what I love about this experience is that I got experience in partnerships like at 21, and that created sort of a foundation of understanding of how to, from making a cold call, setting a meeting, talking about what they were into, and where, in this case, like, where does your heart lie, or where do your charitable contributions lie? And then building a case for why it's important to support MDA. And then like extracting water from a stone, it felt like at some point, because a lot of people didn't know what Muscular Dystrophy Association was, or didn't know anybody affected, and building a case for why they should be giving, to this not-for-profit. So did that. And it was an incredible, next start to my career. So I had like this ticket sales foundation. I had a partnerships foundation in the nonprofit space. So I spent years working in nonprofits, did some sports stuff, did marketing, landed in Reno, and worked for the team first as an account executive in corporate partnerships. I had 8 years experience by this point, but the only job open was the AE role. And I moved, you get to Reno for a job or a relationship. I got here because of a relationship, and had to get the job. And I thought I deserved more from the Aces, but I was like, Emily, check your ego. They don't know you from anybody. Like, you have to prove yourself and what you can do. So I did. And I brought in a lot of money in corporate sponsorship. And 2.5 years later, I was named vice president of the team. And we hit another fork in the road. My husband was leaving the military and got his first corporate offer in Houston, Texas. Literally knew nobody. And we flew in for a weekend. My first time there, I was there for 24 hours to like pick a house. And then we moved a month later, and again, was kind of a fish out of water. My son, Magnus, at the time was like 10 months old. And what did I do? I started networking, and the place we started with was my husband's company. Okay, this guy gave you a job and moved your family to Houston and generously offered to take us out to dinner. And it was so funny because we were sitting with he was the CEO of this company at the time. And they were the largest metal building manufacturer in the world. And like, he's like a big dog. And he's sitting with Sean and I, and he's like, over sushi, like the best sushi I've ever had in my life. He's like, Emily, how can I help you? I'm like, Norm, I need some connections. I need a career. I'm not built to stay. I love my son more than anything, but I'm not built to like take him to the park every day. And I am so in awe of women who are, because I can't do it. And if I don't know, I think you probably resonate with me on this one for sure, but I wanted to go back to work. So he started introducing me to a few people around town via email, and I met with these people, and I brought my freaking A game. I was like so prepared. Here's all the things that I've done, asking them like smart questions about the city. And it was like 2 degrees of separation. Met Janice Burke, who's the CEO of the Harris County Houston Sports Authority, had lunch with her, and she offered me a contract over eggplant parmesan. And that was my first role in Houston to help me continue my career in sports. So I was their director of sales for a number of different events that were coming into the city. And about 2 years later, the Aces called me, and they called me because I had kept in touch with the president. About every quarter, I'd reach out and say, hey, it's time to talk to me again. What's going on? Here's what I'm doing in Houston. I saw this happen, maybe with the Houston Dynamo, or I went to a Rockets game and like, I saw them do this. Have you thought of this? It was me being outside that zone of the everyday of the Aces organization, trying to bring some new ideas. So I got a call in early 2018 and they said, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to move back to Reno and be the general manager of the team? And I went and made a big pros and cons list, and there's a lot in the pro column. And so Sean and I, and now I had 2 kids, moved back to Reno, and I took that role in 2018. So that's sort of like the shortest version of the story I could create on how I became the GM of the Aces. And with that also came the sort of asterisk and byline that I was the first female to have a GM role in AAA baseball in almost 20 years.
That is awesome. Love the story. I tend to write down little things that people say, and I got a couple laughs there because, I mean, there's definitely a theme, right? There's a couple of themes in your journey that are apparent to me about your approach, your mindset, the partnerships, the sales, like the presentation. It seems like you have all that stuff down, right? You figured that out, right? And I love, though, the little details of like what you ate at these dinners. You're like, I'm meeting with this big dog over sushi, best sushi in my life. And you're like, over eggplant parm, I get an offer. Like, what other dinners have you had in these like sort of transformational moments?
Hey, I always remember good food.
That really like made me laugh. The detail. So that's great. And now, as I mentioned, you are taking a breather, right? So you've had 3 children now. You have a daughter, which is awesome. And I bet that's special, right? Because, 2 boys, daughter, maybe feeling like, I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else, maybe feeling complete, like having that daughter. We talked about, you have brothers, I have brothers. Mm-hmm. Having daughters for me is so special because I don't have sisters.
Yeah.
It's the void, right? Like I was laughing when we had our 3rd daughter. I was like, this is so funny. I always thought I'd be surrounded, like I'd have boys. And I feel like, this gift has been given to me of daughters, and it's just so special. I don't know if you feel that way.
Totally. Yeah, I absolutely do.
Yeah. So let's talk about this breather, right? And I want to get into this a little bit more. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. So you mentioned, you're like, I can't sit at home every single day, right? And take my kids to the park. And I totally get it, right? It's like, it's good. It's good for a while. It takes a lot of pressure off. Sometimes we find ourselves as women, and I don't want to discount men, but I can only speak for women because I am a woman, and I am a mother. But you find yourself in these transitions where there's a lot of pressure, right? And in my last interview, I talked to Jahan Blake about like, why do women leave? Like sometimes like women leave and it's like this really hard moment in a woman's life and her career with fear of like, what will people think? And, what does it mean about me? And will I get back? And what will happen? And, I want to hear more about what's going on with you because, you're owning it. Right. And I want to just talk through like how you're owning it and that mindset that goes into that hard decision to take a breather and sort of how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely could even own it a little bit more because I find myself sometimes like hesitant to talk about like what I'm going through right now, but I was really intentional with calling it a breather. Someone said to me like, oh, that's nice that you're taking a step back to hang out with your kids. I'm like, whoa, no one said I was stepping back from anything. Like that, just the way that sounds is not what I'm intend to do. Like, I don't want to step back from anything. I'm always stepping into something. But what I'm doing is taking a breather, and breather felt like the right term because as you were saying with the pressure, like somebody was on my chest every day. Like the load was becoming a lot. And I took on so much. And as women, and again, speak for women because I am a woman, there could definitely be men going through this too. There's this period in your life where you say yes to everything. Like you don't want to miss any opportunity. It's yes, yes, yes. And we want to have it all. And I totally believe in the saying, have it all. And I'm going to talk about that too. But we want to have it all. So we say yes, because we don't want to miss an opportunity. And all of a sudden, like there's all these things on our plate. And I felt like I was only at like a 60% success rate at everything I was doing. And I was forgetting things. I was just not like my all-star stuff. I felt like I was lacking all the time. Like I'd wake up in the morning behind, like all my practices and planning and intention, I was behind. And I don't want to use the word blame, but I definitely will place a little bit of blame on the pandemic, because there was a lot of things that were so unreliable, as we all know, during that time, especially in the childcare sector. And the childcare, my husband has an incredibly successful career and his job is a huge priority. And, someone's sick in the kids' school and they're out for 2 weeks. I'm like, what are we supposed to do? So we don't have family out here. So, I'd be home with the kids, and thank God for working from home, but it's not like you can ignore your child all day and shut the door. So that was definitely stressful. And then just also, I did the job. I was GM. I worked in baseball for like over 7 years in my career. And I've done that. I've spent the summer at the ballpark, made a ton of sacrifices to work long work weeks, stay long nights, be there on weekends. And when I looked around my house, I had 4 people who deserved an opinion on whether or not their mom continued to do that. And the opinion was that we would like you to be around more. And while we love going to the stadium, like we're not going to work with you, all the time. And we want to be the priority, not your physical presence at this building. And that was really the tipping point for me in the decision to leave. It wasn't the work. It wasn't the people. I loved the people I worked with. I loved my job and all the things that I got to do. Like when I got to sit back and reflect on a lot of that, I got to launch brands, do the marketing campaigns, partnerships, like you name it. It was a blast, but the volume of time plus the time required at the facility was just something that was like not in the cards anymore. And I don't want to say that like I couldn't do it, because I truly believe I can do anything. It was just like that chapter was coming to an end. And I do have a piece of advice here because it helped me. So I gave my notice in mid-October, and my last day, I finally turned off my computer like the first week of January. And what that helped me to do is take a long time to wind down. And I didn't tell my staff until December because I didn't want to be irrelevant for 2 months. But my ego needed to be dealt with, because Emily Jaenson, general manager, was the title. And it's how I was introduced for almost 4 years. And I knew myself, and I knew that I needed to tend to that piece of the ego and not just cut the cord and go, especially with intentionally not having my next step ready to go. I needed to take some time off to refocus, re-energize, and also remove myself from my current situation so that I didn't just take the next offer, that I really decided and understood what I wanted in my next career move, and that next career move would fit it. Not that I would just say yes because I was flattered and, wanted to be working. So that's kind of, how it all came through. And, now the last 3 months, I've been a lot more with my kids, a lot less stress. I took 2 vacations, which I would have said no to before, because I was always prioritizing my work. And We got a puppy, which I've had time to like take care of at home. Yeah. And worked a lot on the podcast. And that has also helped me deal with the purpose piece. Like I want to have a purpose every day. I like coming into the office, whether that's in my house or like at another building, but the podcast has helped me keep a purpose. It's not going to be enough for me long-term, but for now, meeting incredible women, having these conversations, having an opportunity to share that with a wider audience with the intention to help women level up in their careers has been amazing. And also led to me getting my proposal accepted for a TED Talk. So I get to do that in May.
Wow.
On the TEDx stage in Reno. So I've been keeping busy for sure.
Awesome.
I'm just not busy cashing checks.
Right. So, okay. So much here with what you just talked about. I mean, there's so much here. The juggle is real. Okay. People always call it the struggle. I call it the juggle.
Yeah. Better word.
And the pandemic threw 10 more oranges into the juggle. Like you're like, oh my gosh, I had 3 and I was good with 3 and now I have 10 and I'm starting to drop these like oranges that I'm juggling. And oh my gosh, this doesn't feel good. Right. And I think people make a choice. I think what happened with a lot of women is you have to make a hard choice. And I'm not saying this is exactly what happened with you, but when you start to feel like you're not doing the best job that you could do, that's when it starts to feel hard, because I think like you or me, it's like, we like to crush it and feel like at the end of the day, when we go home, we left nothing out there. Right. And that is part of like that athletic mentality, that competitive mentality. So when you start to feel like, oh my gosh, I dropped that ball, that doesn't feel good, but I don't have time to pick it up. Then you're like, and I think that's part of the hard part about managing, a home, a family, a job. And it is 100% possible. And I will tell you this, like going into the pandemic, I have again, 3 daughters, they were all in school full time. Right. And I was like, this is my moment. I had done something similar to you, as I took a breather. I kept myself active. You're actively networking with your podcast, it's like a huge networking channel. In addition to a marketing channel. But I took a breather and I was like, okay, when I have them all then back to get put in school and, tucked away and safe, that's my moment. And 6 months after my moment, the NBA canceled their season. And I was like, oh my gosh, my moment is over. But anyway, the things that come out of these transitions are sometimes really beautiful, amazing things. I mean, I founded Wins during the pandemic because I became really in touch with my personal mission, right? I stripped out some things that were causing me to have stress. And I doubled down on saying, okay, I'm going to work exclusively with women owned and led businesses. This is what gives me joy. This is what I feel connected to. And I think during this process for you, you'll probably start you're getting a TED Talk. Are you kidding me? You're going to start to really move down the path of your personal mission here. And to your point, talking about closing the computer and saying, I'm not just going to accept a role that comes my way just because it feels like it might, entertain my ego. I love that part of that, what you just said is it's hard to shut off the ego, to say, you're going to be okay. But actively choosing your next step and taking the space you need to really have clarity on what that is. And I think it does take time to find that clarity around what do I want to dedicate myself to next? Because to your point, you did the job. You were the GM. You have that title forever. You have that credibility forever. What's next? Right. And I totally get the nights at the ballpark, that's hard work. And it's not just hard work. It's like you physically have to be present, and that's sports. Like it's nights, it's weekends, it's hard. So I think it's amazing what you're doing. I think owning it is the right attitude. I think a lot of people struggle with owning it. But I think by owning it, you are leading by example, which, goes right into the whole idea of leadership that I want to talk about. But before we talk about your leadership journey, I want to touch on something else. So because you were the GM of a baseball team, professional baseball team, you have an inside perspective on the landscape there, the temperature there. So like not every day. So every week, let's go with every week, I'm seeing another woman being appointed to a role in the front office, on the coaching staff, behind the news desk, women that are breaking barriers, for the first time. I would love to hear, from your vantage point, because you were and you are one of those women, and you forever will be one of those women. What does it feel like, in that role? We see what we see in the media, right? We see the celebration of it. What does it feel like, when you're really in that role?
Yeah, well, I certainly can't speak for everyone because it depends on who's around you, the way that feels. I will say that my personal attitude around it is, I really believe you can't be what you can't see. So this visibility is just paramount for our generation and the next generation. Because I used to just say, oh, for the next generation. I'm like, no, for us too, because we have long lives to live and big careers, and there's always an opportunity to make a cool move. So the visibility is so key, and I love it. And I don't think the storyline is old. I think it needs to keep coming out every time that this happens, so that we can celebrate it, recognize it, and show what is possible. In terms of the temperature, I know it's like a huge spectrum of greatest, most supportive to terrible, and it's really, really hard. And so I think my attitude towards that is going internal. And what I did was ask myself, what do you want now? And what are your goals? So you get the job, that can't be the climax. What's next? So what I did was define three goals that were really my purpose in the role. And the first was kick ass at my job. If I'm in this role and I have this asterisk next to the title, I got to do something good, right? I got to show what I can do and why I earned it. And I don't think that's just for women. I think everyone should be trying to crush it in their job, but specifically, I wanted to make sure that I made some big contributions and did really great work. So it wasn't just all show and headlines. The work was amazing, and people were talking about my work, not about my gender. The second was supporting my team, meaning the people that I managed. I think your team is your legacy, and supporting them to do great work was so important to me. And I think if that, for a woman that gets a first title, I think that is just those first two, kick ass. Okay. And then the second is supporting your team. You got to have those champions around you that say my boss or my manager is the bomb. She is awesome. She knows what she's doing. She's helping me be successful. That is going to help with any of the negativity that may or may not surround a woman being in a man's room, if that exists in the workplace. Because even if you do a great job, that negativity can still be around you. But then if you take that next step and support your team, then you have an army of people saying standing up for you. And then my third part of that was why the podcast was born. It was, how do I support women? And I didn't want the story to be about me. Like, I didn't need to tell my story over and over again. There's thousands of women crushing it in this industry. I wanted to give them the microphone. And one of the most surprising things about the podcast is the number of women who've never done a podcast before, or never told their story, or never posted on LinkedIn, or never talked about like what they had accomplished. And I just feel really proud and honored to be the one that gets to give them a microphone to share their story, because it does a lot for them as an individual. It's good practice. First of all, talking about all the great things you did. It's great content, putting you on a pedestal, like, hey, I'm cool enough. I got asked to be interviewed, And then the third thing is it's giving other women permission to like talk about the great stuff they've done. I don't know why we just talk about like, oh, we, the team, and not I did this, I did that, I accomplished this, and we need to, because that's what gives you the next opportunity.
Amazing. Yes. I wrote down your team is your legacy. It's an incredible piece of advice. I think that you are doing an incredible job. And I think like you should be so proud of, being one of the firsts, but the attitude that you take coming into it and, supporting women. I mean, you're doing all the things, right? It's incredible.
Oh, really so sweet. Thank
you.
No,
it really is. And it leads right into like the next question I have. And you kind of said it, your motto has been be so good that they won't forget you. And you've proven that has worked, because you're like, well, the Aces called me back and they wanted me back. There's a reason for that. Right. I want to just get into though, this idea of leadership. You chose the name Leadership is Female for your podcast, and you're showcasing amazing leadership, throughout your whole career, and including what you're doing right now during your breather phase. But what does leadership mean to you? And how do you walk that walk? Like, in your role at home, like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So first of all, I think anyone can become, or already is, a leader if you take the time to look around you and your situation and the people. And then the question really is like, who am I and who do I want to become? And I mentioned at the top of the podcast that I was a good athlete as a kid, and I did really well in school, got good grades, but I was so shy. And I had dreams of a big career, but standing in the corner wasn't going to help me get there. So I really started that question like 20 years ago, who am I and who do I want to become? And I got to start acting like that person. And I think that's a lot of what leadership is. Like, there's a big spectrum of, quiet and calm to this boisterous and loud leadership. And you can reside like anywhere on that spectrum. But to be a leader, I think you have to believe in yourself, first of all, and like what you're capable of. And then you got to walk the walk. Like, when no one's looking, like, what are you doing and how are you showing up? And I think leadership through action and service. I've always been a leader that's also a contributor. I know how to delegate like anybody, but I will also do the work. I was at the top, but still selling because I wanted to lead by example, that you don't get to the top and then just like boss everybody around. You still need to be a contributor. And those are kind of my core principles of leadership, but it's about growth too. And that question, who am I and who do I want to become? Like, there's been instances in the job where you have to have tough conversations, or talk to people you don't necessarily want to, or deliver bad news. And I've had to ask myself, like, okay, Emily, like, you have this role. This is your job. If you were looking at you from the outside, like practicing some type of like self-distancing, if I were to exit my body and look back at Emily, like, would I want to see her turn around and walk in the other direction, or like take on that conversation head on? And that mindset has really helped me to grow in my leadership and like push myself to do things that are super uncomfortable. I think we've all heard that saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that comes with like a lot of ambiguity. Like there's not really any direction in that saying. So for me, that visualization of like leaving my body and watch myself work, what would I do? Or what would I want to see myself do? And that's really pushed me through those uncomfortable situations in leadership and really helped me grow and know what I'm capable of.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Like leadership is growth and growth is leadership. And I think that's a cool way to think about it, but also examining the way you present. That's so important. I think that's really hard for people. I think being in touch with what am I bringing into this? How can I be better? That is a leadership quality 1,000%, right? Being in a role or having a title, it doesn't mean you're a good leader. It's like not interchangeable. So I really, that all makes a lot of sense to me. And I love that you're doing the podcast. I love the title of the podcast. It plays right into your whole mindset. And I also love that you mentioned, this was like a couple minutes ago here, that you're giving women an opportunity to share their story. And I totally get it, because I do a lot of the same thing. But isn't it amazing how many of them have never done something like this?
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. So many. They're so nervous. And I'm like, oh, we're just going to have a conversation. And then they finish and they're like, oh,
it's like enlightening. Gosh. It's like, it's like light bulbs are going off and it's the comfort level is reached. And wow, this actually feels really good. I've never had someone come on an interview and say to me at the end, I feel terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, I feel this was really fun.
Yeah. Well, one woman emailed me afterwards and said, cause I'll send them, wrap up email and like links and all that. And she said, I've never posted on LinkedIn. What should I write? And this woman, she is amazing and so smart and talented. And she just never had said anything about like her work and what she'd done on LinkedIn. She's an executive at a team at a very, very high level. And that was kind of cool. First of all, like the humility to like come back to me and say, I never posted on LinkedIn. Like, what should I write? But the opportunity for her to say, I did this thing and like, you should come listen, because I feel really good about all the tips that I laid down and telling my story and the advice. She gave all this advice about interviewing, and it was golden. And I kept telling her like, gosh, tell people you did this so your network can listen to and see, what a star you are beyond the boardroom.
Yeah. It's so cool to be able to give someone that kind of experience and help them grow in that small way. I've never posted on LinkedIn. What should I say? This is a growth moment. I have so many women who I've worked with who have that same moment. And I am like, all you got to do is push publish. And guess what? And then you can edit it afterwards. Like, and we laugh and, but I've been thinking a lot about this specific thing. I'm going to write a blog. It's in my head. It just needs to get out onto the internet about what to do after you have a podcast episode recorded. Because in my experience, and you'll probably see the same thing, I could share it a million times, right? I could say, hey, I interviewed this person on this podcast. But especially on LinkedIn, when you share it, like this example here, I'm interviewing you, right? It's kind of funny because we both have a podcast, but I'm interviewing you. And when you go share that you did this interview, then LinkedIn and the LinkedIn community, they gather around and celebrate that win. Okay. Because it's your win. It's not my win.
Yeah.
Right. I'm kind of giving you the platform, but it's your win. And so I think a lot of people don't know what to do after they've done the interview. And, sometimes I say like, here's the links, or you could share this. And sometimes I see the trepidation, like, okay, maybe I'll share it and I won't say anything or whatever. But the power of the episode is amplified when the guest shares. And that's like the rule of thumb, right? And so I'm like thinking a lot about like, okay, I need to like document this and write this down almost as an instruction manual for, okay, now you've done a podcast interview. Maybe it was your first one. Here's what to do now. And by the way, like, stop listening to the fear voice that's in your head. Like, this is a proud moment. This is a win. Like, you need to like go ahead and celebrate it. Anyway, side note, let's get back into focus. All right. So I have like a story time that I kind of wanted to get into with you. I have, then obviously talking a little bit more about women in sports, but you mentioned before the interview, okay, like your fun fact, if you will, was that you acted in a promo video as the mom of little Benny when you worked for the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
Which right away I'm like, okay, can I see that clip? Where's that clip?
Oh man, I have a DVD of it. And when I first started with the Aces in like what year was that? 2013, my colleagues in corporate partnerships, I ended up telling them about it probably over beers. And I found the DVD and I brought it in and they made fun of me for like, probably still to this day. It's hilarious. So here's the story. So the Bulls asked the intern women, like, hey, are any of you guys interested in doing this video? 3 of us out of like 7 put our name in the hat and mine was chosen. And so what that meant was I was going to be the mom of this new mascot. So the Bulls have Benny the Bull, who is an all-star. I mean, he's like flips and slam dunks and silly string. Like, he's amazing. Then they had little Benny, who was a giant inflatable. And this was in 2005 into 2006. So this was like when these things first came out. There's like a person in the suit and then a fan that made it like, 12 feet tall. So this was little Benny. And he would walk around and like they would do funny things like with the furry mascot. And little Benny was going to have a child called Big Ben that was like 5 feet tall. So this 12-foot tall inflatable and a 5-foot tall inflatable. So they wanted to create a story around how this child would come to life. So he had to get married, baby, and I had to have a baby. So we have filmed this video of me sitting in at a desk, like in the United Center, and I answer the phone and I'm like, hello. And he can't talk. So I'm like, sure, I'll go on a date with you. And then they like fast forward and we're at Millennium Park and I'm like standing in the middle of Millennium Park in Chicago, and little Benny, like this giant inflatable, like comes up and gets down on one knee and proposes to me with a Bulls championship ring.
Cool.
And which was pretty cool because then I got to like actually put it on like in the video. I say yes and I jump up and down. We have this hilarious like hug and I knock him over. And then it shows like a fast forward, and then the Bulls are in Benny the Bulls had a big van that was painted like with Chicago Bulls and stuff. So I'm in the passenger seat and little Benny is driving with his head out the sunroof because he's 12 feet tall to Rush Hospital in Chicago. And I exit the car with a basketball, of course, like up my shirt, like holding my back, like I'm going into labor. And then Big Ben is born and they play this video on New Year's Eve at the United Center, like on the Jumbotron. And then Big Ben like runs out and he's like
this is ridiculous.
The new
you see this. This is like there was so much effort that went into the storyline.
Yes.
And it's like you and you're married to an inflatable, and then you have the inflatable's child, which is also an inflatable. Yeah, we need that video.
I think it's somewhere in my
Although now it's
office.
like, okay, what do you do with that DVD? It's like, how do you get
I
that?
don't even know how to play it. I don't have a
I know,
DVD
that's
drive
a
on my
problem.
Mac.
That's a problem.
Yes, it is a
Okay, well,
problem.
thank you for that. I love the stories. There's so many like people who have funny stories from their intern days of things that they did, and that like I think might be my favorite story
Thank
so
you.
far. That I'd like have to see this video now. All right, so this was awesome. I always like to talk a little bit about women in sports, which we've talked about, like, this whole interview. But through your podcast, you're giving women the tools they need to level up in their career. I know this for a fact. Everything that you're already doing is influencing the future for women in sports entertainment and beyond. I always say and beyond because we run in the space of sports and entertainment, but so many other industries touch these two iconic like pop culture industries, right? But how do you believe that as you continue to go through your career with leadership is female, with your TED talk, with whatever you do next as a mother, right? We don't want to like leave that out. That's super important. How do you think you will influence the future of this industry where like right now we sit at the roughly 20% of the C-suite is women?
Yeah. Amy, I just want to keep doing my part. And what I hope is that I continue to inspire women to do theirs too. It was, I don't know the exact marker in my career, but growing up in sports, you're predestined to be a competitive person. And I was with my colleagues, male and female. Like I wanted to win. I wanted to be at the top. And this evolution in my career happened probably a few years ago where I was like, man, I don't want to push those down around me. Like I want to lift them up too. And this podcast space is awesome to see so many podcasts coming to light in women and women in sports. And I'm here for it. And the old me would have been like, oh, there's somebody else, we were competitors, but instead of being competitors, I'm like, all right, I've had Jahan on my podcast. I've had you on my podcast. I've had, Deanna. Yeah. I'm like women blaze. I always call her the dynamo.
It's like a club. I think we should form a club.
Yeah. So I had Deanna Witter, who has Women Blazers podcast. She works for the Houston Dynamo. And I literally refer to her as the Dynamo like all the time because she's freaking Dynamo. So I'm sorry, Deanna, that I blanked on your actual name there. But I've had them all on my podcast and celebrated theirs and share the interviews they do because like, how are we going to get further if we are competitors? So it's this like just not the space for that. So that's really become like something that I didn't intend to do in the beginning. And it's really happened organically. And it's been a huge revolution for me and my mindset. And I hope that it's contagious because when women support other women, it is incredible what can happen. What shows up on your phone, like your phone will ring with a new opportunity. You'll get a text message that is like the right message at the right time. You'll be stuck on a project and you know who to go to help you through it. And I think there was this period of competition or pulling up the ladder behind us for so long, and it held us back because we didn't think there was enough room. But man, I feel like we're discovering like we are a force when we work together. And I'm so pumped about that. So pumped. So I'm always like, what can I do? Who do you want to meet? Is there somebody I can introduce you to? Because I feel like I really believe in momentum and in karma. And I'm not introducing so that the karma can come back. I just know that it will. And I genuinely get very happy when I help somebody else like achieve their dreams or find something that they want. And I'm so genuine, like in that exclamation, that helping other people like makes me feel so good, and seeing them win makes me so happy, and just creating this space where we can collaborate and share and get used to celebrating each other and supporting each other. Like that's my goal.
I love it. That's my goal too. We have a lot in common, like from start to finish, and we need to talk more. Okay.
Yes.
But karma is real. I love the thinking around the shift of that competitive energy. That's really powerful. I feel that, right? Like you could go into podcasting, right? And be closed-minded and say, I'm not saying you are closed-minded. I'm saying you can go into it and say, my goal is to get the most downloads, and that's the number I'm looking at. But really, that's actually not, why are you doing it? Right. So like every person who does something like this, all creators, are different, but, I come to it as it's networking, it's marketing, it's content creation. It's all these things that I love, like in one fun thing. Right. And I love the idea of like, shifting the mindset from like, I don't want to push people down. I don't want to pull up the ladder. I want to like move forward together. I think banding together with other women that are in leadership positions that are influential, we're actually being more competitive, because we're working together as a team. To your point, like we become a force when we band together, which is a lot of why I wanted to do what I do in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, okay, let's share our voices. Let's figure that out. That's something that a lot of people like you said, it's hard to figure that out. It's like, what do I say on LinkedIn? Like something as small as that. I'm not used to talking about myself. Right. Well, let's get comfortable with that. Right. Let's get comfortable with the idea of being seen and heard, and let's do it together. Right. Let's work together, because that's what it's about. That's what it's about. So I love that. And I guess we can end with, wins, right? When I created it was, women influencing sports, but also the idea of celebrating our wins, getting comfortable with the idea of talking about our wins, but also, looking forward to, some of the goals that we have. So most of the women that I have on like have goals, right? Whether like it's personal, it's professional. You've already mentioned a couple on the interview, but I'm going to ask you, what wins are you working toward this year, next year? 5 years from now? How can we help you get there?
So first of all, Amy, congratulations on all you've done. I love your platform. I love what you're doing. I love the name. Is just having people talk about their wins, like what that's putting out into the universe is momentous. So congratulations to you. And thanks so much for having me. Goals. So I'm a super goal-oriented person. I actually have given a lot of speeches on goal setting and have goal setting exercises that I can walk an organization through, like on Zoom, that are super impactful and supported by data on what it can do for your company if you all do a goal setting exercise together and then hold each other accountable for those goals. So like you're a manager and your, somebody on your staff was also in this meeting, they set goals so you can support each other in your one-on-one cadence or whatever it might be. So anyway, goals are huge for me. So this year, marathon was just added to the docket. As I mentioned, the TEDx piece is awesome. Like I'm pumped to do it. I have to do another revision and presentation this afternoon. So wish me luck. There's a whole like class behind they don't let anybody get on stage. Like you have to rehearse and be open to like a ton of feedback. So TEDx, the breather being really intentional about this breather and spending great time with my family was like one of the number one goals, saying yes to vacations. We are going to Florida in May, and we just booked Hawaii for October that we were supposed to go to pre-pandemic and are now finally doing. And I was so shut down to like those experiences because I was so focused on my career, and I know that they can coexist. I just was not in the headspace to make that happen for myself at my own fault. So intentional time with my family, really like being in the moment, is another goal for me, and just like the beauty in every moment, whether it's a happy hour with my husband or like watching my kid ride his bike, looking at the view. I mean, just like living my life with my head up and totally alert. And then the podcast, growing the audience. And Amy, to your point, it's not for the downloads. It's for the sharing of the stories that I know can help so many people, men or women. I want the platform to grow so that the women have a larger, more expansive voice. And so that's a goal as well, is continuing to just keep chugging along, producing content, talking to great women and giving them a platform to share their stories, and then trying to do hold up my end of the bargain of that promotion as well, and making sure that it gets out there. So the podcast, and then landing my next role. I don't know what the timeline is for that, but my goal behind it is not taking the next thing for the title or the comp, but taking it because it's a space that I really want to contribute, an area where I have excellence that I know I can bring so much to the table, like for that organization. And then something that also fits the life that I want to lead, and really defining what that is. So I don't want to continue to try to fit like the round peg of the job that has the title that I want into like the square hole of the family and the life that I want to create. And that's probably one of the reasons that I've been intentional about owning it and sharing my story, is because I want to show women what's possible. Just because I was the GM, like, didn't mean I have to stay there for 25 years. I'm allowed to change my mind and have different iterations and experience growth in my career. And it's part of the visibility piece. Like, I got to hold up my end of the bargain and like talk about it and show people what's possible, because I don't want anyone to struggle through something alone. I want them to know that there's other people going through it. So marathon, TED Talk, intentional time with family, vacation, job, leadership is female. Like, those are all on my radar every day, and just trying to keep living a beautiful life.
I love it. Okay. So this is all gonna, unravel itself as it should. And I know this with 100% certainty because you have like 5 different seeds planted for your own success right now. Okay. That's how I think. What seeds do I have planted that are going to bloom at some point that will come to fruition? And which one am I going to pick? Right. I love your mindset and your approach. I loved your point on just because I had the title doesn't mean I need to stay there forever. What you're doing now is showing a growth mindset. You are not going to get stuck. Okay. So I love that. The TED Talk is awesome. They don't just let anybody on stage, but they're going to let you on stage. They're going to let you on stage because you're going to crush it. Right. So I can't wait to see what you do. I would love more info on that TED Talk. If there's any right now, how can people find you on social? What are the handles, the podcast handle? And then when is that TED Talk happening?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm at Emily Jaenson. It's Jaenson. Follow along with me. And it's hard to continuing to contribute to social media, but I'm doing my best to show my life and also leave like just a little drip of inspiration every week, because it helps me and I hope it helps you. At Leadership is Female is where you can find the podcast on Instagram, and that'll link to the website, and at Leadership is Females on all the podcast networks. So just search Leadership is Female. You'll find amazing interviews with just incredible women all over the industry, not just front office. And the TED Talk is in May. So I will be sure to share the link with you, Amy, of my win of getting on stage.
Yes. Please tag me in your win. That's so soon. That's like a week from now. Okay. But you're going to crush it, no doubt. That's awesome. These are all incredible goals. By the way, Emily is a great guest, but she's also a great interviewer. So definitely check out her podcast. This was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And I hope this will be the spark for us to stay in greater touch and continue to support and elevate women together and each other.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily.